The rain came down in sheets against the windows of the Copper Lily, each drop catching the amber glow of Edison bulbs like falling stars. Inside, tucked into the corner booth beneath the exposed brick wall, Callum Reed sat alone with an untouched slice of chocolate cake. 42 candles would have been excessive. There were none. His phone lay face down on the table. 17 missed calls. 12 texts. He turned off the vibration an hour ago because each buzz felt like an obligation he couldn't meet, a reminder that people expected something from him he no longer knew how to give. The bistro was nearly empty. Just him, an elderly couple near the window, and the soft clink of dishes being cleared in the back. He'd chosen this place specifically because no one would recognize him here. No photographers. No board members with forced joviality. No well-meaning friends who try to fill the silence with noise. Just silence. And cake he couldn't bring himself to eat. His fingers traced the edge of the white plate, around and around, the motion mechanical. 4 years. For birthdays since Martina had squeezed his hand in that hospital room and made him promise to keep living. To be present for Ivy. To find joy again. He was failing spectacularly at all three. The front door chimed. A gust of wind carried rain across the threshold before it closed. Callum didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the cake, on the question he'd been asking himself all evening. When did surviving stop feeling like enough? Footsteps approached. Light. Unhurried. A woman's voice, gentle as the rain, broke through his thoughts. "I don't mean to intrude," she said. "But no one should sit alone with chocolate cake on a night like this. Not without at least a song to keep it company." Callum looked up. And for the first time in 4 years, something in his chest shifted, just slightly, like a door left closed for so long it had forgotten it could open. Her name tag read Nora in simple block letters. She stood beside his table with a coffee pot in one hand and an expression that wasn't pity, not quite. More like recognition. As if she understood that some silences were meant to be respected, not filled. "I'm fine, thank you," Callum said, his voice rustier than he'd intended. Nora nodded slowly. She didn't move away. Instead, she set the coffee pot on the table and reached into her apron pocket, pulling out a small paperback book with worn edges. She placed it beside his plate. "Pablo Neruda," she said softly. "Page 47. There's a poem about birthdays that I think you might appreciate. It's less about celebration and more about witnessing. That you existed through another year." Callum stared at the book. Then at her. "How did you?" "The cake," Nora said simply. "And the way you're looking at it like it's a test you're failing." Her smile was small, sad around the edges. "I know that look." She picked up the coffee pot and moved to refill the elderly couple's cups, leaving Callum alone with a book and a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Who was this woman who carried poetry in her apron? Nora Fielding had learned early that people didn't really see waitresses. They saw the uniform, the function, the person who brought food and faded into the background. Most days, she preferred it that way. Being invisible meant being safe. But tonight, something about the man in the corner booth had caught her attention. Not because of his expensive watch or the way he carried himself with that particular stillness of someone used to being in control. It was his eyes. They held the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. She'd seen those eyes before. In the mirror, in the months after her father died and left her with a mountain of medical debt and an emptiness she couldn't name. The bistro was her third job. Days, she worked at the hospital as an administrative assistant. Weekends, she taught piano to children in the community center basement. And 4 nights a week, she served coffee and comfort food to strangers who never asked her name. She was tired. The kind of tired that lived in your bones. But she'd learned something in the last 2 years. Sometimes when you were drowning, the only way to breathe was to notice someone else struggling for air. To reach out, even when you had nothing left to give. The man hadn't touched his cake. Nora glanced at the clock. 30 minutes until closing. She moved through her routine, wiping down tables, restocking napkins, counting out the register. The elderly couple left with warm goodbyes. The rain continued its steady rhythm. And the man sat, still as stone, with his untouched cake and her book of poems. Callum had opened the book to page 47. The poem wasn't about joy. It was about endurance. About the quiet violence of time passing when you weren't sure you wanted it to. About standing at the edge of another year and feeling both ancient and unfinished. "I am not sure I have lived at all," one line read. "Or if I have merely survived in the margins of my own life." His throat tightened. When was the last time someone had given him something without wanting anything in return? When was the last time someone had looked at him, not at Callum Reid, CEO, not at the man whose company had revolutionized data encryption, not at the widower everyone handled with kid gloves, but at the human being sitting alone with cake he couldn't eat? The waitress moved past his table again, carrying a gray dish tub. She didn't look at him, but she hummed something under her breath. A melody he didn't recognize. Soft. Almost mournful, but with an undercurrent of hope. "What song is that?" he asked before he could stop himself. Nora paused. Set down the tub. "I don't think it has a name. Just something my father used to hum when he couldn't sleep. I think he made it up." "It's beautiful." She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you. Music is, the only language I trust when words don't work." Callum understood that more than she knew. "Your father," he said carefully. "You said used to." Nora's smile flickered. "He passed 2 years ago. Lung cancer." She said it matter-of-factly, the way people do when they've told the story too many times for tears. He was a session musician. Piano, mostly. Could play anything by ear. "He taught me that music isn't about perfection. It's about presence." "I'm sorry," Callum said, and meant it. "Me too." Nora picked up the dish tub again. "But he left me with something worth keeping. A way of seeing the world that doesn't require words." She moved toward the kitchen, leaving Callum with a strange sensation blooming in his chest. Not quite warmth. More like the memory of warmth. A ghost of feeling he'd thought he'd buried with Martina. "We close in 15 minutes, Nora said, reappearing with a fresh pot of decaf. "But you're welcome to stay as long as you need. I've got cleaning to do anyway." Callum glanced at his watch. Nearly 11. He should go. Back to his empty penthouse. Back to the silence that felt different than the silence here. But he didn't move. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" he said. Nora tilted her head. "Depends on the question." "Why did you give me the book?" She considered this, pouring coffee into his cup even though he hadn't asked for it. The steam rose between them, curling in the amber light. "Because you looked like someone who needed to know they weren't the only one," she said finally. "And because I've learned that the hardest birthdays are the ones where we're supposed to feel grateful just for surviving. As if existence alone is supposed to be enough." Callum's breath caught. "And if it's not? Then maybe we need to stop measuring ourselves against the wrong metrics." Nora set down the pot. "My father used to say that life isn't about the big moments. It's about the accumulation of small ones. The way morning light hits a wall. The smell of rain. A stranger's kindness when you least expect it." She gestured to the window, where rain still fell in steady sheets. "Tonight, you showed up. You sat with something difficult. That's not nothing." Callum looked at her, really looked. She was younger than him by more than a decade, wearing a stained apron and scuffed sneakers. But her eyes held a wisdom that age couldn't teach. The kind that came from losing something irreplaceable and choosing to keep going anyway. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nora." "Callum." They didn't shake hands. The moment felt too fragile for that. Instead, Nora offered a small smile and moved to flip the sign on the door to closed. "Callum," she said, testing the name. "That's Scottish, isn't it?" "It means dove." He almost laughed. "Ironic, considering I've spent most of my career in tech acquisitions. Not exactly peaceful work." "Maybe that's why your parents chose it," Nora said. "A hope. A wish for what you might become, not what you might do." No one had ever said anything like that to him. The elderly cook emerged from the kitchen, untying his apron. Heading out, Nora. You good to lock up? I'm good, Marcus. See you Thursday. The cook paused, glancing at Callum, then back at Nora with a raised eyebrow. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. Marcus shrugged and left, the door chiming behind him. Now it was just the two of them. Rain. Edison bulbs. The ghost of chocolate cake. Do you play? Callum asked, nodding toward the small upright piano in the corner. He'd noticed it when he came in, dusty and probably out of tune. Sometimes, Nora admitted. When the place is empty and I need to think. Would you play something now? She hesitated. I'm not very good. Your father said it wasn't about perfection. Nora's eyes widened slightly. Then, slowly, she smiled. You listened. I did. She crossed to the piano, wiping dust from the keys with the edge of her apron. Sat down on the worn bench. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, uncertain. Then she began to play. The melody was simple, unpolished. Some of the keys stuck, and the tuning was off in places. But underneath the imperfection, there was something achingly honest. A song that didn't try to be anything other than what it was. Callum closed his eyes and let it wash over him. When was the last time he'd stopped long enough to listen to music? Really listen, not just have it playing in the background while he worked or drove or filled the silence with noise. Nora's fingers moved across the keys with a gentle confidence, pulling melody from the broken instrument like water from a stone. And then, so softly he almost missed it, she began to sing. No words. Just a hummed melody that wove between the piano notes like thread through fabric. It was the same tune she'd been humming earlier. Her father's song. Something inside Callum cracked. Not broke. Cracked. The way ice cracks in spring, not destruction, but the first sign of thaw. He thought of Martina. Of Ivy. Of all the ways he'd convinced himself that staying distant was the same as staying safe. That if he didn't let anyone close, he couldn't fail them. Couldn't lose them. Couldn't survive another loss. But sitting here, in this quiet bistro with rain against the windows and a stranger's song filling the spaces he'd left empty, Callum realized something. He was already lost. Had been for 4 years. And maybe, just maybe, being found was scarier than staying hidden. When the last note faded, Nora sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the keys. The silence that followed felt sacred, like the breath between prayer and amen. Thank you, Callum said, his voice rough. Nora turned to face him. For what? For singing. He paused. For seeing me. Her eyes glistened in the amber light. We all deserve to be seen. Do we? Yes. She said it with such quiet certainty that Callum almost believed her. He stood, pulling his wallet from his jacket. Left $300 on the table, far more than the cake and coffee warranted. Nora noticed but didn't comment. Just watched him with those knowing eyes. Happy birthday, Callum, she said softly. He paused at the door, rain waiting beyond the glass. How did you know? She pointed to the cake. Context clues. And the way you were looking at it like it represented every year you weren't sure you wanted to survive. Callum's hand rested on the door handle. Rain drummed against the glass. He should leave. Go home. Forget this strange, gentle encounter with a woman who read poetry and played broken pianos. But he didn't want to forget. Do you work tomorrow night? He asked. I do. Then I'll see you tomorrow night. Nora smiled. It reached her eyes this time. I'll save you the corner booth. Callum returned the next evening. And the evening after that. And the one after that. Each night, he sat in the corner booth with a book or a laptop, ordering simple meals he barely touched. And each night, Nora moved through her shift with quiet efficiency, pausing at his table to refill his coffee, to share a thought about the book she was reading, to ask gentle questions that never felt intrusive. It became a ritual neither of them named. On the 5th night, she brought him soup without him ordering it. You look tired, she said simply. On the 8th night, he brought her a new book of Neruda poems, this one with an uncracked spine. She held it like it was made of glass. On the 12th night, he asked about her father, and she told him stories that made her laugh and cry in the same breath. He listened, understanding for the first time in years that grief and love were not opposites but companions. On the 17th night, she asked about his daughter. The question caught him off guard. He'd been careful not to mention Ivy, to keep that part of his life separate. Protected. "What makes you think I have a daughter?" he asked. Nora gestured to his phone, which sat face up on the table for once. The lock screen showed a photo of a young girl with wild curls and Martina's smile. "She's beautiful," Nora said. "She has your eyes." Callum's throat worked. "Her name is Ivy. She's 10. Does she live with you?" "No." The word came out harder than he meant. "She lives with her grandparents. Martina's parents. It's better that way." Nora sat down across from him, the first time she'd done so in all these weeks. "Better for who?" "For her. I work constantly. I travel. I'm not. I can't." He ran a hand through his hair. "I can't be what she needs." "What does she need?" "A parent who's present. Who knows how to do this." Martina was the one who, his voice cracked. She was the one who knew how to be a mother. I'm just the one who didn't die." The words hung between them, raw and terrible. Nora reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm. Rough from work. Real. "Callum," she said softly, "you're not failing her by being human. You're failing her by being absent." He pulled his hand back, something hot and defensive rising in his chest. "You don't understand." "You're right. I don't." Nora's voice remained steady. "But I understand what it's like to lose someone and convince yourself that you're not allowed to keep living. That somehow, by staying small and invisible, you're honoring their memory. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it?" The question sat between them like a stone in still water. Callum stood abruptly. "I should go." "Callum. Thank you for the coffee." He left money on the table and walked out into the night, leaving Nora sitting alone in the booth, her hand still warm from where she touched his. 3 days passed. He didn't return to the Copper Lily. On the 4th day, his assistant knocked on his office door with an unusual expression. "Sir, there's a woman downstairs. She says she's a friend. She doesn't have an appointment." Callum looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been staring at the same email for 20 minutes. "Who is it?" "She said her name is Nora. She's carrying a—" His assistant paused, bemused. "She's carrying a potted plant." His heart did something strange. Stumbled, then raced. "Send her up." When Nora stepped into his office, Callum felt the space shift around her. His office was all glass and steel, minimalist and cold. She looked like a splash of color in a black and white photograph, wearing jeans and a green sweater, holding a small pot with a struggling basil plant. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "But you left your book at the bistro. The one you'd been reading. I thought you might want it back." She set the book on his desk. Then the basil plant beside it. "And this?" Callum asked. "Basil doesn't thrive in neglect," Nora said quietly. "But it also doesn't do well with too much attention. It needs the right amount of water, the right amount of light. Not too much. Not too little. Just enough." She finally looked at him. "I thought you might need the reminder." Callum stared at the plant. At this woman who tracked him down to deliver a metaphor wrapped in dirt and leaves. "I'm sorry," he said. "For walking out. For. You don't owe me an apology." Nora tucked her hands in her pockets. "But maybe you owe one to yourself. Or to Ivy." His daughter's name in her voice made everything more real. "I don't know how to do this," Callum admitted. "How to be present without breaking. How to let people in without losing them. How to be enough when I've spent 4 years being nothing." Nora crossed to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. My father told me something once, right before he died. He said that love isn't about being enough. It's about showing up anyway, even when you're certain you'll fail. Especially then. She turned back to him. Your daughter doesn't need you to be perfect, Callum. She needs you to be there. To try. To let her see that it's okay to be broken and still keep going. What if I can't? You can. She said it with such certainty. You've been showing up to a quiet bistro for weeks, sitting with your grief, learning how to be in the same room as your own heart again. That's the hardest part. Everything else is just practice. Callum looked at her, this woman who worked 3 jobs and carried poetry in her pockets and saw people others walked past. This woman who'd given him the gift of being witnessed without judgment. Why did you come here? He asked. Because you matter, Nora said simply. And because I know what it's like to believe you don't. I'm a stranger. No, she said. You're not. The silence between them shifted. Became something else. Something neither of them had the words for yet. Have dinner with me, Callum said. Not at the bistro. Somewhere else. Let me take you somewhere you don't have to work. Nora hesitated. Callum, I don't think. Please. He said it so softly it was almost a prayer. Let me thank you. For the songs. For the poems. For reminding me that being alive and being present aren't the same thing. She studied his face for a long moment. Then nodded. Okay. But not somewhere fancy. Somewhere real. Somewhere real, he agreed. As she left his office, Callum noticed she'd written something on the inside cover of the book she'd returned. He opened it carefully. The cure for anything is salt water, sweat, tears, or the sea. Isaac Dinesen. And maybe, sometimes, a stranger's kindness. N. They met on Saturday at Pike Place Market. Nora arrived in the same green sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Callum wore jeans. He couldn't remember the last time he'd worn jeans, and felt oddly exposed without his usual armor of suits and certainty. I haven't been here in years, he admitted as they walked between stalls of flowers and fresh fish. Really? Nora looked surprised. But you live in Seattle. I live above Seattle, Callum corrected. 47th floor. I've spent so long looking down at the city, I forgot what it feels like to be in it. They walked. Nora stopped to smell lavender, to watch a busker play guitar, to laugh at the fish throwers' theatrical displays. Callum watched her, mesmerized by how fully she inhabited each moment. No phone. No distraction. Just presence. Coffee, she suggested, pointing to a small café tucked between vendors. They found a table near the window. Rain threatened, but hadn't started yet. The café smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Can I ask you something? Nora said, cradling her cup between her palms. Anything. Why did you start coming to the Copper Lily? I mean, really. It's not exactly on any billionaire's regular rotation. Callum smiled despite himself. You looked me up. I got curious. She didn't sound apologetic. Callum Reed. Tech genius. Widower. Notoriously private. Worth more money than most people can imagine. She tilted her head. So why spend your evenings in a rundown bistro with terrible coffee? The coffee's not that bad. Callum. He sighed. Set down his cup. Because it was the first place I walked into after my birthday where no one expected anything from me. No one knew who I was. No one needed me to be anything other than a man sitting alone with cake he couldn't eat. And now I come because you're there. The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Nora looked away, but not before he saw the color rise in her cheeks. I'm just a waitress. You're not just anything. Callum leaned forward. You're someone who sees people. Really sees them. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I'm not special, Callum. I'm broke, working 3 jobs, drowning in debt, studying for a degree I might never finish because I can barely afford tuition. I live in a studio apartment with a broken heater and mice in the walls. I'm extraordinary, he finished. You're extraordinary, Nora. Her eyes filled. Don't what? Don't make me more than I am. Don't put me on some pedestal because I sang a song and handed you a book. I'm just someone trying to survive, same as everyone else. No, Callum said gently. You're someone who learned how to truly live in the margins of survival. That's different. That's everything. Nora shook her head, tears spilling over. You don't understand. I'm not. I can't be what you think I am. I'm not some manic pixie dream girl who's going to fix you with poetry and music. I'm a mess. I cry in my car after work. I eat cereal for dinner. I'm terrified all the time that I'm wasting my father's legacy by being ordinary. You're not ordinary, Callum said. And I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to keep being exactly who you are. Someone who reminds me that the world still has softness in it. That I'm allowed to be human. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. Why are you really here, Callum? What do you want from this? From me? It was the question he'd been avoiding. The one that terrified him. I don't know, he admitted. I just know that when I'm with you, I remember what it felt like to want things. To look forward to something other than the end of the day. To believe that maybe I'm not as broken as I thought. Nora was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared. Of what? Of you. Of this. She gestured between them. Of wanting something I can't have. Of being someone's temporary comfort and then watching them go back to their real life where I don't fit. Callum's chest tightened. Nora. I know who you are, she continued. I know about your world. Galas and boardrooms and power. And I know who I am. I'm not naive enough to think, her voice broke. I'm not naive enough to think this ends any way but with me getting hurt. Then why did you come here today? Because I wanted to. The admission seemed to cost her. Because I'm tired of protecting myself from hope. Because you looked at me like I was real, not invisible. And I haven't felt real in so long. The rain started then. Soft at first, then steadier. People around them opened umbrellas, pulled up hoods. But Callum and Nora sat still, locked in a moment that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down. I need to tell you something, Callum said. About Martina. About why I can't be Ivy's full-time father. Nora waited, her hands still wrapped around her coffee cup. When Martina was dying, he began, voice rough, she made me promise her things. To be there for Ivy. To not shut down. To keep living, not just existing. And I stood there and promised her everything she asked because I would have said anything to make her feel peaceful. He paused, jaw working. But the truth is, I lied. Not intentionally. I meant those promises when I made them. But the moment she was gone, I realized I had no idea how to keep them. Every time I looked at Ivy, all I could see was Martina. Every smile, every laugh, every question she asked, it was like being stabbed over and over. Tears slid down his face. He didn't wipe them away. So I convinced myself that the best thing I could do was step back. Let her grandparents raise her. People who weren't bleeding from the inside out. People who could smile without it feeling like betrayal. But Ivy needs you, Nora said softly. She needs a father who won't crumble. I see her once a week for supervised visits. We sit in parks. We eat ice cream. We talk about school. And the whole time, I can feel myself holding back, keeping her at a distance because if I let her all the way in. His voice broke completely. If I let her all the way in and something happens to her, I won't survive it. I didn't survive losing Martina. I'm just the ghost of who I used to be. Nora reached across the table and took both his hands in hers. Callum, listen to me. You're not a ghost. You're someone whose heart broke so badly you're terrified to use it again. But that's not being dead. That's being human. I've failed her. Then start unfailing her. Nora squeezed his hands. One moment at a time. One conversation. One dinner. One bedtime story. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. What if I can't? You can. She said it with the same certainty she'd said it in his office. Because you've been practicing. You've been showing up to a bistro night after night, learning how to sit with difficult feelings. That's the same skill. That's all parenting is, showing up even when it's hard. Callum looked at their joined hands. Hers were small, calloused from work. His were larger, marked with scars from a childhood spent taking things apart and putting them back together. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Any of it. Being a father. Being whatever this is between us. This, Nora said quietly, is two broken people learning they don't have to fix themselves alone. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? She smiled through her tears. What if we both just let ourselves try? Not perfectly. Just honestly. They left the café and walked through the rain without umbrellas. Let themselves get soaked. Laughed at how ridiculous they must look, a billionaire CEO and a waitress, drenched and shivering, walking through Pike Place Market like they had nowhere else to be. I need to see Ivy, Callum said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. Not for a supervised visit. I need to actually see her. Talk to her. Tell her I'm sorry for being gone. Nora smiled. Yes. You do. Will you? He hesitated. Will you come with me? I don't think that's a good idea. She should have you to herself. No distractions. You're not a distraction. He cupped her face with both hands, rain streaming between them. You're the reason I remembered I'm allowed to feel things. That I'm allowed to want more than just survival. Nora closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Callum. I'm going to kiss you, he said. If that's okay. It's more than okay. He kissed her there in the rain, soft and searching. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was tender. A question and an answer at once. A beginning. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nora laughed, a sound of pure, unexpected joy. What? Callum asked, smiling. I just realized, she said, I don't know what happens next. And for the first time in years, that doesn't terrify me. Callum called Martina's parents that night. The conversation was difficult. There were tears, accusations, old wounds reopened. But underneath it all, there was love. And concern. And a desperate hope that maybe, finally, Callum was ready to step back into his daughter's life. She asks about you, Margaret, Martina's mother said. Her voice was thick with emotion. Every night before bed, she asks when you're coming home. Callum's heart shattered and reformed simultaneously. I'm coming home. Tomorrow. Can I take her for the day? Just the two of us. A long pause. Then, yes. But Callum, if you're going to do this, you need to really do it. No more half measures. No more keeping her at arm's length. I know. I'm ready. Or, I'm trying to be ready. That's all she needs to hear. He picked Ivy up at 9 in the morning. She came bounding out of the house with wild curls barely contained by a purple headband, wearing mismatched socks and a backpack shaped like a ladybug. Daddy. She launched herself into his arms with the uncomplicated trust of a child who hadn't yet learned to protect her heart. Callum caught her, holding on tighter than he meant to. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and morning sunshine. When had she gotten so big? When had he missed so much? Hey, ladybug, he said, voice thick. Ready for an adventure? Where are we going? Anywhere you want. Ivy pulled back to look at him, her eyes, Martina's eyes, searching his face. Really? Anywhere. Really? She thought for a moment, chewing her lip the way Martina used to. Can we go to the aquarium? And get hot chocolate? And can you stay for dinner tonight? Each request was a small test. A question beneath the question. Are you really here? Can I trust you? Yes, Callum said. To all of it. They spent the day moving through the aquarium's dim corridors, watching jellyfish pulse through dark water like underwater ghosts. Ivy talked non-stop, about school, about her friends, about a book she was reading about girls who could talk to dolphins. Callum listened, really listened, and realized with a sharp pang how much he'd missed. The gap between the daughter he remembered and the daughter standing beside him was years wide. "Daddy," Ivy said, pressing her hand against the glass as an octopus drifted past. "Why don't you live with us anymore?" The question he'd been dreading. Callum knelt beside her, so they were eye level. "Because I was scared," he said honestly. "When Mommy died, I was so sad that I didn't know how to be your dad anymore. I thought if I stayed away, it would hurt less. But I was wrong." "Does it still hurt?" "Yes. But I learned something important." He tucked a curl behind her ear. "Love hurts sometimes. But the hurt means the love was real. And pushing you away, that hurt worse than anything." Ivy's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you didn't want me anymore." "Oh, baby." Callum pulled her close, his own tears falling. "I want you more than anything in the world. I was just too scared to let myself want you. Because wanting means you can lose, and I already lost Mommy." "But you didn't lose me," Ivy said against his shoulder. "I'm right here." "I know. And I'm so sorry it took me this long to see it." They stayed there on the aquarium floor, holding each other while strangers moved past, while sea creatures glided through glass walls, while the world continued around them. When they finally pulled apart, Ivy wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Is it okay if I'm still sad sometimes? About Mommy?" "It's more than okay. I'm sad sometimes too. And that's good. It means we remember her. It means she mattered." "Do you think she'd be mad at you? For being gone?" Callum considered this carefully. "I think she'd understand why I left. But I think she'd want me to come back. To be brave enough to love you even when it's scary." Ivy nodded solemnly. "Then, can we get hot chocolate now?" Callum laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed? "Yes. Let's get hot chocolate." They found a café near the waterfront. Ivy ordered hers with extra marshmallows and whipped cream. Callum ordered his plain and found himself smiling as Ivy emerged from her cup with a whipped cream mustache. "There's someone I want you to meet," Callum said. "If that's okay with you." Ivy perked up. "Who?" "Her name is Nora. She's a friend. Someone who helped me remember how to be brave." "Is she your girlfriend?" Ivy asked with the blunt curiosity of a 10-year-old. "I don't know yet. Maybe. Would that be okay?" Ivy thought about this, swirling her hot chocolate with a spoon. "Does she make you happy?" "She makes me remember what happy feels like." "Then it's okay." Ivy looked up at him. "Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that before, you know. She said that being sad forever wouldn't honor her. She said living is how we say thank you for the time we had." Callum's throat closed completely. Of course Martina had said that. Of course she'd prepared their daughter in ways he'd been too gutted to see. "You're right," he managed. "And you're so much like her. Smart and kind and braver than I ever was." "I'm like you too," Ivy said. "Grandma says I get my stubbornness from you." "That's probably fair." They finished their hot chocolate and walked along the pier, watching ferries cut through gray water. The afternoon light was soft, diffused through clouds. Callum found himself memorizing details. The way Ivy's hand fit in his, the sound of her laughter when seagulls fought over a dropped French fry, the exact shade of wonder in her eyes when a street musician played violin. All the moments he'd missed, trying to protect himself from missing them. At dinner, pizza at a place Ivy chose, with video games and terrible lighting, Ivy asked the question he knew was coming. "Are you coming home for real now?" Callum set down his pizza slice. "I want to. But I need to do it right. Talk to your grandparents. Figure out logistics. Make sure I can give you what you need." "I just need you, Daddy." I know. But you also need stability. And I need to prove to you, to them, to myself, that I can show up consistently. Not just for one good day. Every day. Ivy considered this. Okay. But can I call you? Like every night. Every night, Callum promised. And I'll be there for dinner at least 3 times a week. And weekends. And I'll figure out how to work less and be present more. And I can meet Nora? When you're ready. No rush. Ivy smiled. I'm ready whenever you are. He drove her home as the sun set, the car filled with comfortable silence and the occasional commentary from Ivy about things she saw through the window. When they pulled into the driveway, she unbuckled but didn't immediately get out. Daddy. Yeah, Ladybug. Thank you for today. For being here. Thank you for giving me another chance. She hugged him fiercely. I love you. I love you too. So much. Margaret was waiting at the door. When Ivy ran inside, chattering about jellyfish and hot chocolate, Margaret approached the car. Callum rolled down the window. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For coming back. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than staying away, Callum admitted. I couldn't see it until someone showed me. Margaret smiled, sad and hopeful at once. Martina always said you'd find your way back. She believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. I'm going to do better, Callum said. I promise. I know you will. She patted his hand through the window. Come for dinner Tuesday? Ivy would love it. I'll be there. Callum drove straight to the Copper Lily. It was late, past 9, but the lights were still on. Through the window, he could see Nora wiping down tables, humming to herself. His heart did that strange stumbling thing again. He walked in. The door chimed. Nora looked up, surprise and joy flickering across her face. Callum. I didn't think, how did it go? He crossed the empty bistro and pulled her into his arms. Held her like she was the anchor keeping him tethered to solid ground. It went, he said into her hair. It was hard and beautiful, and I cried more than I have in years. But I showed up. I told her the truth. And she forgave me. Nora pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. He kissed her then, soft and grateful. When they broke apart, both smiling, Callum noticed something he hadn't before. What's that? He pointed to a small table near the piano. Nora blushed. Oh. I started leaving books out. For other people. In case they need them the way you did. People can take one, leave one. A little free library. That's perfect, Callum said. That's exactly perfect. She shrugged. I figured if one book could change everything, maybe others needed the chance too. Everything changed, Callum repeated quietly. You're right. Everything changed. Not everything, Nora said. You were always capable of this. Of showing up. Of loving. You just forgot for a while. And you reminded me. We reminded each other. They sat in the corner booth, his booth, sharing a piece of apple pie and talking about the day. About Ivy's laugh, about Margaret's tears, about the feeling of remembering what it meant to be a father. She wants to meet you, Callum said. Nora's eyes widened. Really? When you're ready. No pressure. I'm terrified, Nora admitted. What if she doesn't like me? What if I say the wrong thing? She'll love you, Callum said with certainty. Because you're easy to love. Nora looked down at her hands. I'm not sure about that. I am. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to name. But the feeling was there, undeniable as gravity. Callum, Nora said softly. What are we doing? I think, he said carefully, we're learning how to stop surviving and start living. Together. Together, she repeated, testing the word. Then she smiled. I like the sound of that. The Copper Lily was more crowded than usual. The little free library had caught on, and people came not just for coffee but for the books, for the sense of community Nora had unknowingly created. She'd cut back to just 2 jobs now, the hospital and the bistro. Callum had offered to help with tuition, but she'd refused at first. It took him weeks to convince her that accepting help wasn't the same as accepting charity. That letting people care for you was its own form of courage. I'm investing in a future music therapist, he'd argued. Think of it as a business decision. You're impossible, she'd said, but she'd accepted. And enrolled full-time for the spring semester. Tonight, Callum sat in his usual booth, but he wasn't alone. Ivy sat beside him, working on homework with fierce concentration. She'd started staying with him 3 nights a week. Then 4. Then 5. Last week, they'd painted her new bedroom together. She'd chosen lavender walls and constellation stickers for the ceiling. Margaret and Richard came for dinner every Sunday. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult conversations, old hurts that needed tending. But they were trying. All of them. Learning how to be a family reformed by loss into something new. Daddy, how do you spell metamorphosis? Ivy asked. Before Callum could answer, Nora appeared with 3 mugs of hot chocolate. Metamorphosis, she said, setting the drinks down. It's Greek. Means transformation. Ivy beamed. Thanks, Nora. Anytime, butterfly. The nickname had stuck after their first meeting, when Ivy had nervously asked Nora about her father, and Nora had told her about his love of monarch butterflies. About how he used to say that the most beautiful things in life required transformation. Struggle. The courage to emerge from the cocoon completely changed. Ivy had looked at Callum then and said, like Daddy. He's transforming. Nora had cried. Callum had cried. Even Ivy had cried a little. Now, watching his daughter and this woman who'd changed everything share easy conversation over homework and hot chocolate, Callum felt something he'd forgotten was possible. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope despite it. Later, after Ivy had fallen asleep on the booth's cushioned seat, Callum carried her to the car while Nora locked up. They drove to his penthouse, the place that had felt like a mausoleum for years but now held laughter and music and the chaotic warmth of a 10-year-old's presence. He tucked Ivy into her lavender room, kissing her forehead. Love you, Ladybug. Love you too, Daddy, she murmured, already half asleep. In the kitchen, Nora made tea while Callum watched the city lights below. Seattle looked different now. Not distant. Just there. A place he was part of, not separate from. I've been thinking, Nora said, handing him a mug. Dangerous. She swatted his arm. Hush. I've been thinking about my father. About what he'd say if he could see me now. What would he say? I think he'd say that I finally stopped waiting for permission to take up space. To want things. To believe I deserve them. Callum pulled her close. You do deserve them. Everything good. Everything beautiful. So do you, she said against his chest. You know that now, right? That you deserve to be happy? That it's not betraying Martina to keep living. Most days, he admitted. Some days I still forget. But then I look at Ivy, or I hear you sing, or I remember what it felt like to be numb and I realize, this is what Martina wanted. For me to choose life. Even when it's messy and hard and I'm terrified I'll fail. You won't fail. I might. Probably will sometimes. But I'll keep trying. Nora pulled back to look at him. That's all any of us can do. Keep trying. Keep showing up. Keep believing that the next chapter could be different than the last. You're very wise for someone who claims she's just a waitress. I'm a music therapist in training, she corrected with a smile. Get it right. My apologies. Callum kissed her forehead. And for the record, I love you. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but couldn't figure out the right moment. So I'm just saying it now, in my kitchen at midnight. I love you, Nora Fielding. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I love you too. even though you're impossible and stubborn and apparently don't understand how to operate a dishwasher. In my defense, I've had staff for 20 years. That's not the defense you think it is. They laughed, the sound warm and real and completely ordinary. The kind of ordinary Callum had once thought he'd never want again. But here, with this woman who'd seen him at his worst and believed he could be better, ordinary felt like everything. 6 months after that birthday he'd spent alone with cake he couldn't eat, Callum stood in the Copper Lily during a private event. Nora's music therapy graduation recital. The bistro was packed with people, classmates, professors, hospital staff, regulars who'd come to know her through her kindness. Marcus the cook was there, looking proud. Margaret and Richard sat with Ivy in the front row. And in the corner where a broken piano used to sit, there was now a refurbished upright, tuned and polished. Callum's graduation gift to her. Nora sat at the bench, nervous fingers hovering over the keys. She'd been practicing for weeks, perfecting a piece she'd written herself. A song about transformation. About loss and finding. About the courage it takes to let yourself be seen. This piece, she said to the gathered crowd, is dedicated to my father, who taught me that music is how we say the things words can't hold. And to someone who reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being beyond repair. She looked at Callum. He smiled. Then she began to play. The melody was the same one she'd hummed that first night. Her father's song. But fuller now. More complete. As if it had been waiting all this time to be finished. And when she began to sing, not just humming but actual words, lyrics she'd written about second chances and small mercies and the people who remind us we're allowed to want more, Callum felt tears stream down his face. Ivy reached over and held his hand. "She's really good," his daughter whispered. "She really is." The song built to a gentle climax, then softened again, ending the way it had begun, with a simple melody that sounded like hope. When the last note faded, the applause was thunderous. Nora stood, bowing slightly, her face flushed with joy and relief. People lined up to congratulate her, but she looked past them all, searching for Callum. Their eyes met across the room. He mouthed, "I'm proud of you." She mouthed back, "Thank you. For everything." Later, after everyone had left and it was just the two of them cleaning up coffee cups and stray programs, Nora found Callum standing at the window, looking out at the rain. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "About a year ago," he said, "I sat in this bistro, ready to disappear. Convinced I'd already used up all my chances at happiness. That I was just going through the motions until..." He paused. "I don't know. Until nothing. And now. Now I'm thinking about next week, when Ivy starts piano lessons with you. And the hospital fundraiser where you're performing. And the vacation we're planning for August. I'm thinking about tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days stretching out ahead of us." He turned to face her. "I'm thinking about the future. And I haven't done that in years." Nora cupped his face, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "The future," she said softly, "is going to be beautiful. It already is. Some people believe love is found in grand gestures, in movie moments and sweeping romance. But that's not how most hearts heal. They heal in quiet bistros, over chocolate cake no one eats. They heal in shared songs and borrowed books. They heal in the courage it takes to show up for one small moment, and then another, until you realize the moments have built a bridge back to the life you thought you'd lost." Callum and Nora didn't save each other, but they reminded each other that saving yourself is possible. That transformation isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to hide. It's about believing that broken people can still hold each other gently. That second chances aren't earned through perfection, but through the willingness to try again. That sometimes, the person who sees you when you feel most invisible becomes the person who helps you remember what it means to be seen. And in the end, that's what love is. Not completion. Not rescue. But recognition. The moment when someone looks at you, really looks, and sees not what you could be, or should be, or used to be. Just who you are, right now in this moment. And decides that's enough. That you're enough. That together, you're both learning what enough means. And that perhaps enough has been there all along, waiting patiently for you to stop running and finally come home. 2 years later, on Callum's birthday, the Copper Lily hosted a party. Not for him, for everyone. An annual tradition Nora had started, where anyone sitting alone could come and be seen. 40 people showed up that first year. Callum sat with Ivy and Nora, eating chocolate cake and watching strangers become friends. And when someone asked him what he wished for, he realized he didn't need to wish anymore. He already had everything he'd been too afraid to want.